seven wonders of the world of sea. And many are the places I have been. Take my advice, folks, and see old Beale Street first. You'll see pretty browns in beautiful gowns.
Beale Street, famed in song and legend, is the place where W.C. Handy wrote the blues, where people of African descent fostered a thriving community. Beale Street, attraction for the adventurer and pleasure seekers, was the main street of black America during the time of Jim Crow segregation in the South.
Here on Beale Street, the only art school in American music was created.
I hate to see that evening sun go down.
Sniff my cocaine, sniff it by the grain. The doctor said kill me, but he didn't say when. Hey, honey, take over for me.
Beale Street by night was a center of pleasure, a refuge from the daily oppression of racial segregation in the South. It was a place filled with colorful characters, from the professional to the laborer. Good times abounded in dives, gambling dens, and saloons. Anything and everything went on and could be obtained.
Let's go down. Let's go down to Beale Street. Hey, go a minute. Hey, hold in the wall. Hey. Yeah, Bill. I'm going down.
Beale Street was the mecca for blues music. Bessie Smith and other famous artists sang their hearts out in the Beale Street theaters. Today, Beale Street lives only in memory.
This afternoon that the brotherhood of man will become a reality.
Here on Beale Street is a black man's greatest heritage.
If the Mississippi River could talk, it would tell us of Beale Street's beginnings. In 1541, Hernando de Soto, a band of explorers and African guides, sailed up the Mississippi and landed at a bluff. Years later, a town was founded called Memphis. The earliest settlers in West Tennessee were Native Americans and Africans who came during the European expeditions and stayed. They were here in 1803 when the Louisiana Purchase spawned Western expansion, attracting settlers from the Carolinas, Virginia, and Kentucky. Small farms and plantations began to appear. The riverboat industry thrived. The cotton industry was getting a firm start, and the demand for slaves grew. By the time Memphis was incorporated in 1826, cotton and slaves had a home. In the early 1800s, the formative years of Memphis, Beale Street was populated by wealthy whites who lived in large mansions with their slaves as house servants. Not all whites were slave owners. In 1825, a Scotch woman, Frances Fanny Wright, came to Memphis with the idea of educating and emancipating the slaves. Fanny set up a colony in Neshoba, Tennessee. Her experiment failed when she contracted malaria and returned to Scotland. Liberal thinking by abolitionists created an atmosphere in which slaves could become freedmen. One such freedman was Joe Clouston, whose master in freeing him gave Joe a parcel of land on which to make a living. Clouston, through his enterprising efforts, saved his money and was one of the first blacks to own and operate a business on Beale Street. The end of the Civil War brought freedom for the slaves. It also brought an undercurrent of racial animosity that exploded in a bloodbath in 1866. It was written that armed black soldiers started a race riot on Beale Street. Large numbers of white citizens shot at any blacks that were visible on the streets. Schools and businesses were burned to the ground. More than 40 people were killed. According to the 39th Congressional Report, the riot was actually started by former Confederate soldiers and Irish policemen who resented the new status of former slaves. Beale Street survived that catastrophe, but the yellow fever epidemics of 1873 and 1878 almost wiped out the city. Ignorance, unsanitary living conditions, and inadequate sewage systems contributed to the disease, and the fact that no quarantine measures were taken during the influx of immigrants, European and slave alike. As long as the cotton industry flourished, matters of health were of no concern. Yellow fever took many lives, causing whites to panic, fleeing the town, leaving behind blacks and anyone too poor to follow. Black citizens had no alternative but to set up quarantine measures. Schools were turned into hospitals, and medicine was administered to the sick. To keep order, black militia groups were formed. Black undertakers and grave diggers buried the dead. As cold weather came, the dreaded disease left the city, leaving it in total ruin. Due to graft and the non-payment of taxes, Memphis lost its charter. From the ashes rose a leader, Robert R. Church, black son of a white steamship captain known as the boss of Beale Street. In 1881, Robert Church bought the first bond that would help bring a charter to Memphis. This act inspired others to follow his lead and join in the drive for economic recovery. With the return of a charter to Memphis, business boomed. The 1890s and 1910s saw the city grow and prosper. Cotton was still king. New industry in construction and lumber brought the railroads, riverboats, and migrants. Memphis became a magnet for the rural blacks seeking a better life. They came from Arkansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee, and the focal point was Beale Street. At a time when racism and bigotry was at its height, Beale Street offered a refuge from oppression. Migrants and sightseers coming to Beale Street were exposed to a thriving business community. Most impressive were the black entrepreneurs, of which the most significant was Robert R. Church. He was responsible for developing Beale Street into a commercial center for Southern blacks. The boss of Beale Street, Church owned and operated businesses in the Beale Street community. Church, the most powerful black man in the country, was the South's first black millionaire. In 1906, Church created the Solvent Savings Bank and Trust, the first black bank of its kind in the South. A philanthropist, Church gave freely of his money, helping others at every turn.
My daddy and mother were slaves, and when they got here, someone told him about Bob Church and his father. Bob Church's daddy was very kind to my daddy, and he found out that he could help my daddy in getting a place to get him a meat market.
Church gave away a whole lot. He was nice about giving money. He gave money to this Howe Institute over there, and full of us running a school there. Other things. And he built, he bought that ground and built an auditorium there. A large wooden auditorium where people, colored people, would have somebody show when they came to Memphis. Made flower gardens all around. It was a pretty thing.
In 1899, Jim Crow segregation in Memphis did not provide recreational facilities for its black citizens, nor was there a place for black theatrical groups to perform. Church built a park and auditorium so that blacks would have a place for recreation and entertainment. Church's auditorium was the center of social life for blacks in Memphis. Athletics, dances, religious gatherings, music instruction, and political meetings were held here. President Theodore Roosevelt spoke here, as well as black intellectuals W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington.
Booker T. Washington made 2 speeches there, and I heard both of them. Booker T. Washington stood up there and talked. Looked at his watch. He said, "Here I've been talking to you people 2 hours." Says, "I know you're tired of me." Why, he said something that started our auditorium to roaring. And the folks jumped up. No, wait, keep on talking. We're not tired. Throwing the hats up in the air and catching them, and stomping their feet. Keep on. He was so interested. Now, you could just sit there and listen to him talk 2 hours yourself. You wouldn't get tired.
Church's park and auditorium was only a part of a thriving black community. Beale Street was a mecca of professionals and laymen. Black people of all kinds came together to create a culture within the midst of social injustice. First Baptist Beale Street Church, founded in 1869 by Reverend Morris Henderson, a former slave, has served as a beacon of light for over 120 years. In the 1890s, when racial injustice in the forms of lynchings and the Ku Klux Klan terrorized black citizens, First Baptist Beale, with spiritual courage, published a militant weekly called The Free Speech. Within its walls, Ida B. Wells, the paper's associate editor, fearlessly wrote against the evils of racism and lynchings.
I hate to see the evening sun go down. Hate to see the evening sun go down. 'Cause my baby, he done left this town.
Ida was run out of town because of her honesty, yet she continued her crusade against injustice. The Moore Normal Primary and Secondary School. From 1870 until its relocation to Walker Avenue in 1914, was the sole source of education and preparatory skills for black people in the Beale Street community. The Angel of Beale Street, Julia Hooks, a social worker and pioneer in education, founded the Hooks School of Music, thus beginning the musical tradition of Beale Street. Black businesses on Beale Street were comprised of banks, markets, cafes, shoe shops, barber shops, drugstores, and undertaking establishments.
The actual onslaught of black professionals into Beale Street began in the 1880s. The dentists, the doctors, the early lawyers, J.T. Settle, B.F. Booth, all of them who came in around the 1880s up until about the 1910. That was a 30-year period when just the whole embodiment of black life began to take forth and spring and flourish, and it did not begin its decline until about 1925.
Beale Street's complexion was not totally black. Most of the property was owned by whites. Jews ran the dry goods and pawn shops. Italians operated the saloons and gambling dens. The Greeks ran the restaurants, and the patronage was primarily black.
And it's funny because Beale Street was always an integrated street. People want to think of it as black, but it was integrated. Because when people such as Roosevelt or Taft came, or Jenny Lind, and this was the great vaudeville era, they performed, they came, they spoke, they sang at Bob Church's auditorium, and blacks and whites came together on the street. The street was owned by whites, so why shouldn't whites be there?
World War I signaled the beginning of a decline on Beale Street that would continue until its demise in the 60s. Even so, Beale Streeters made contributions to the war effort, abroad in the field and at home in civil defense. Demand for laborers in the northern industries during the war attracted blacks from the South and Memphis. Black migrants left in droves, seeking higher wages and freedom from the racism and oppression in the South. The 20s ushered in a period of racial cooperation, prosperity, and promise for Beale Street. But the Depression came to America with the decade of the 30s, and the promises became unfulfilled dreams.
Beale Street started declining around the very late 20s or early 30s, the Bessie Smith era. The tone of the country took a different stance. Very harsh things began to happen as far as the KKK, things coming out of Washington with the government. It began to filter down to the South. Little by little, the community, black community base began to be eroded. And yet at the same time, many more blacks were being educated, which meant that they had a further reach away from the nestling, from the nest of the black community.
Edward Hole Crump, the boss of Tennessee politics. W.C. Handy composed a tune called Mr. Crump that helped get him elected in 1909 during a Memphis mayoral campaign, thus beginning a 40-year reign of political control. Crump, a staunch segregationist, ran Memphis like it was his own private plantation. Through ruthless application of a poll tax, he constricted the political influence of the black population, and for the duration of his political power, the democratic process was stifled.
Mr. Crump won't allow it, ain't gonna have it here.
Whoa, whoa, good morning, Captain, how you feeling, shine? I don't want no trouble, I want my whole back time.
Water was backing up in Nonconnor Creek and Wolf River because the Mississippi was so high, and they practically dragooned black people to make them go down there and put sandbag levees all around, not on the main river, but the tributaries going into it, and they'd go get them out of the theater on Beale Street or anywhere they could find them, haul them down there in trucks and put them to work. But I can remember in those days you had to have a poll tax to vote, and the ward bosses or the ward healers would have the poll taxes, and they'd get a truckload of black people and drive them from one precinct to another and hand out the poll tax. They'd go in and vote, take them somewhere else, vote for Mr. Crump's candidates.
Three men who made Beale Street renowned: Church, Handy, and Lee. Robert R. Church, Jr. was the son of the South's first black millionaire. Acquiring his father's business sense, as well as his own forethought and organizational ability, Bob Church became a successful businessman and astute politician. In 1916, he founded the Lincoln League, an organization which increased the number of black voters. In 1917, a black youth was lynched and his remains thrown about Beale Street. This inspired Church to launch a protest movement that resulted in the first Memphis chapter of the NAACP. Church, a staunch Republican, served as delegate to 8 national conventions from 1912 to 1940, thus gaining the reputation as the Lincoln Belt's roving dictator. W.C. Handy, the father of the blues, gave foundation to the sorrow songs of the roustabouts, field hands, and cotton pickers.
Hey-oh, hey-oh, I wouldn't live in Cairo.
As a young man, Handy was already an accomplished musician and had toured with Mahara's Minstrel Band. In 1906, Handy came to Memphis and joined Matthew Thornton's Knights of Pythias band as the leading musician. From Pee Wee's, the legendary musicians hang out on Beale Street, Handy composed the Memphis Blues. The first published blues, it had the first jazz break for the tenor saxophone.
I had the grandest time. I went out a-dancing with the Tennessee deer.
Handy's music wasn't totally accepted in Memphis. Upper-class blacks turned away from the blues because it reminded them of bad times and slavery. So he played mostly for whites. And it wasn't until Handy moved to New York City and received worldwide recognition that he was fully accepted in Memphis with a park on Beale Street named in his honor.
Look there, that always slicking his hair, and folks he sure could pull some ball.
George W. Lee, known as Lieutenant Lee, was one of the few Southern black officers during World War I. Lieutenant Lee was a gifted orator and a local and national leader of the Republican Party. A civic leader, Lieutenant Lee promoted organizations such as the Elks that fostered black pride and community development. A successful Beale Street businessman, he was also a gifted writer whose short stories about Beale Street received national acclaim.
One thing I think that's important to mention, a contribution that he made with Boss Crump here in Memphis was in Handy Park. He thought that a park should be in honor of Handy, with Handy's name on it here in Memphis. Crump opposed it at first, but when my father brought it to his attention that Handy was becoming world famous for his music, Crump began to realize that this could put Memphis on the map. And because of that, he donated Handy Park, and as it followed, my father got a statue put in Handy Park.
Lieutenant Lee was known for his role in Memphis and known on Beale Street, just like Mr. Crump was known in Memphis. And he was concerned about the black people in Memphis, Tennessee. And we all know Mr. Lee as the mayor of Beale Street because he was interested in fighting for justice and humanity for black people.
Church, Handy, and Lee, Beale Street's finest.
I first came to Beale Street in 1934, and Beale Street was in its heyday. All the movie theaters and the gambling halls and things of that type.
In the 20s and 30s, Beale Street was the mecca for blues and jazz musicians. A prominent band leader on Beale Street was Maurice Holbert. Holbert, a dance instructor and promoter, booked some of the best jazz musicians in the country from his Appomattox Club.
I was there in the early 30s. I booked Louis Armstrong. First was to book Louis Armstrong in the city of Memphis. I had a hard time getting him here, but we finally did. And I played him in the Palace Theater for 3 days and nights.
Because my hair is curly, just because my teeth are pretty, oh, just because I always wear a smile, like to dress up in the midnight.
And after he finished his performance at the theater, he would come to my dance hall at the time. It was called the Appomattox Club. And most of the people from the theater would come up to my dance hall to dance to Louis' music. Did real well there. And one of the performers, another performer is coming out, Ethel Waters. She was a very, very close friend of mine. Since my man and I together, keeps raining all the time. And when she performed at the Palace Theater, when she leave the theater, she would come up to my dance hall, and people would follow her up there. And we got along real well.
Young and old, fall for it, oh, they go for it, on the floor, talk about hot and
I was the manager of the Elks Club. We booked Cab Calloway. So that is part of some of the
entertainment and promotions that I did down through the years.
Memphis was one of the few places in the Mid-South that provided rooms for black travelers during the Jim Crow era. Sunbeam Mitchell, one-time manager of B.B. King, provided a rooming house for traveling musicians from his night spot, the Club Handy.
1842, that's when I come to go in rooming house business on Beale, we call it, then to a hotel. And at that time, it was segregated. And we cared a lot of mostly entertainers after we got in the hotel business. On account of used to have a lot of midnight rambles down there even now. And then the only space for the black musicians to live would be up there at the hotel where I was at on 195 Hernando. And over the Pantas Druggers. They had policy games, crap games, everything else going on Beale Street. But during the time, you didn't have many black people that operated businesses on Beale. And the only thing that operated on Beale downtown, the thing that was Italian that had those places and had those black people running those places for them. So you could walk out of one door into another door, and you could find anything going on in those we call them joints.
And of course they'd have the problem just like they do today. But at the same time, there's always something going on Beale Street. They'd have the midnight rambles, and they'd have the dance halls and on and on.
Something. I said, can I ask y'all something? I said, can I ask y'all something? Ain't I'm clean? Yeah. But Lansky Brothers did a damn good job, yeah? See, if Lansky Brothers can make me pretty, it can make you pretty too. Hey, fellas! Yeah. Hey, fellas! Y'all ready for it? I said, y'all ready for it? Let's do it.
1, 2, 3, 4. Rufus Thomas, famed rhythm and blues performer, had his beginnings at the Palace Theater as master of ceremonies on amateur night. An observer of the midnight rambles on Beale Street, Rufus has fond memories.
She came so walking a dog.
The Palace Theater was the showplace of the South and was only an outlet for black entertainers. And during their stay, which was usually a week at the Palace, they do their regular shows Monday through Sunday. But on Thursday night, they would add a little spice to it. They use little dirty words, as we say, use little cuss words, you know, which that you did at night, and you didn't do it during the regular shows during the day. So every Thursday night were nights for white folk. That's when the white folk came, and the blacks were out. Although it was it was in a black neighborhood, and the theater was owned by white. Nello Pacini and a fellow by the name of A. Barrasso. They were the owners of the theater. So, which means that on Thursday nights were for whites. They'd come in and for the spicy stuff on Thursday nights. Then on Friday and Saturday was our night. Friday and Saturday. In fact, we had all the nights with the exception of Thursday. And then we'd get a chance to see all of that spice and stuff. Actually, the ramble was midnight shows late night shows. We were almost live at that time, but we just didn't have the current name for it. They would do the regular show, then on late night they would add a little spice to it, and the girls wouldn't strip. They wouldn't get nude, but they'd go all the way till you get to the point where you think that they were, and the lights would go off, and then that was it. But it really created a whole lot of screaming and yelling and hollering and going on, hoping that it probably would slip from a hand and you would see what you came to see, but you didn't see it because it wasn't there. But anyway, that was the Midnight Ramblers on Beale Street. Late night shows, Thursday nights for white, and all the rest of the nights belong to black.
In the early 30s, Beale Street has created an annual event to celebrate cotton with a week-long ceremony that took place in May. A king and queen were crowned, and it culminated in a parade down Beale Street. Many of the best high school bands in Memphis participated. Called the Memphis Cotton Makers Jubilee, it was founded in 1935 by a black dentist, Dr. R.Q. Vinson, and his wife, Ethel Vinson, who was the first Jubilee Queen. Actually, the Jubilee was created to show black contributions in the cotton industry. Racial attitudes at this time prevented blacks from participating in the larger Memphis Cotton Carnival.
The Cotton Carnival Association is an all-white organization. The Memphis Cotton Makers Jubilee is an all-black organization. We have existed 46 years, and the reason that we have had these two separate organizations is because of the racial attitudes and Mr. Jim Crow himself. The black organization retained all of its activities in the black community and the Cotton Carnival in the white community. But in 1981, we are seeing a change, and we hope the change is for the better. We did extend our program to include 3 events in the Cotton Carnival activities. The social events were very good, and quite a bit of racial intermingling was done. We had these parades come down Beale Street, and the strangest thing about a parade, it does not know any color at all. There were whites and blacks watching the parade back in the 30s, and people atop buildings, hanging on trees, just anything just to see the parade. And we never felt that we really had a successful parade unless someone fainted. We had an ambulance standing by, and somebody always rode in that ambulance. The exciting thing about the Jubilee, I think, has always been the parades. And our parades have been just outstanding.
The Cotton Makers Jubilee is symbolic of the spirit and people of Memphis, Tennessee, who once embodied the community of Beale Street. If and when Beale Street does rise like a phoenix from its grave, the spirit and people of Memphis will be waiting to join in the celebration. However, there were times when things were not so pleasant. Historically, Beale Street and violence went hand in hand. Most things written and said were both fact and legend, with many people having contrasting viewpoints.
I'm gonna shoot my woman just to see her fall.
In those days, Memphis was called the homicide capital of the world, and killings on Beale Street just happened almost nightly. They'd in a dice game, a crap game, and we'd write maybe a paragraph on them. Nowadays, those would be big stories, but in those days, a black killing on Beale Street might have gotten 6 or 8 lines in the paper, and that was it.
Well, Billy, too, his father ran a grocery store there at Poplar and Dunlap. And Bill had a hamburger situation there. Well, they had hamburgers in different parts of Memphis. So he's very efficient, very, he's quick-tempered, you know. And he got so that he'd go down on Beale Street and gamble with those color fellows down there, you know. So they got broke one time. Several times he got broke. But one night, it was December the 10th, 1908. He went down there with pockets full of money. Those other gamblers, they won every penny that he had. So he walked out there mad as he could be. And he said, I'm going home, get my pistol, and I'm going to come back here and make a funeral parlor out of this place. He went home, got his pistol, and he came back there and shot several of those black men and one white woman, I mean. And with 7 people. 4 of them fell down on the floor and died.
Well, not all the killings were on Beale Street, but there were enough of them down there, particularly in the gambling games and things like that.
Interesting point is the legend of Beale Street being a place of murder. That's entirely erroneous. Beale Street was contributed as being a place of murder by the white media. Most of that happened in the 1820s or 1860s when the city was developing, and was later attributed to Beale Street.
Contradictions, truth, and myth. The fact remains that vice and crime were a part of Beale Street, and it wasn't until 1940 that bootlegging, prostitution, gambling, and policy were put out of business.
The liquor was legalized in 1939, but then they went to closing it down, put the lid on the gambling, prostitution, and what have you. In other words, they cleaned it up around 1940, and that's the way it's been ever since. No more gambling, no prostitution, no policy. They put the lid on and put it on tight.
In 1947, a change in racial attitudes on a national level was symbolized by Jackie Robinson's entry into pro ball with the Brooklyn Dodgers. On a local level in Memphis, Nat D. Williams, Mr. Beale Street, a historian and newspaper columnist, became the Mid-South's first black disc jockey. This reflected a change in racial attitudes. At the same time, Memphis and Beale Street awaited the first black police.
Yes, I remember when the first black policemen were hired in Memphis. It was in the late 40s after World War II. And frankly, I think World War II had a lot to do with that. The men came back, they'd fought for their country, and they began to think that they should have more representation in city government and other places. And Mr. Crump was still the boss, and for a while they wouldn't do it. But finally, they agreed to have some black policemen, and they policed mainly on Beale Street.
Of course, after the hiring of the first policeman, I was one of the first, original 9. Our beat was Beale Street. But we really had no problem with race because the only racial white folk that we ran into were white folk that run restaurants on Beale Street. I mean, the Jim Crow system in Memphis made sure that there wouldn't be no run-in. I mean, it was just a fact that white folk went where white folk went and black folk went where black folk went.
At first, they didn't allow them to arrest white people. They were only supposed to arrest black people. And that didn't hold for very long because the policeman couldn't just sit by and watch a white person, a black person, or any colored person commit a crime without doing something about it.
And white folk were always fearful of black police anyway, so we had no problem with them. As I said, we had a problem. One, white man would come down here late at night looking for women. He would be drunk, and we would accost him, and he would be afraid, and he would wait. We would hold him there. The lieutenant would come, either put him in the car, cam, and turn him loose. If he was not responsive to him, he'd go and arrest him, but we were never a part of that arrest.
But funny thing, some of the old-time Beale Streeters kind of objected. They didn't welcome those black policemen with open arms like you'd think they might have. They said the black policemen were tougher on them than the white policemen.
The civil rights movements of the 50s and 60s brought social change to America. Black people were no longer confined to segregated sections like Beale Street. Strangely, this new freedom called integration accelerated the demise of Beale Street.
The actual demise of Beale Street, the death knell that came to Beale Street, was the first step was when these students on these grounds said, no more. We're tired of being treated as second-class citizens. And they, despite the fact that Hollis Price and some of them wanted them to wait a little, went en masse and declared this city to be integrated. That was the first step. The last step of the death knell was when they murdered Martin in the city, Martin Luther King. That killed it completely.
Civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. went to Memphis, Tennessee in 1968 to answer the cry of striking sanitation workers. On March 28th on Beale Street, a peaceful protest march turned into a violent riot. Ironically, it would be King's last march. Within a few days, he would be killed by an assassin's bullet, not far from Beale Street.
Something is happening in our world. The masses of people are rising up, and wherever they are assembled today, whether they are in Johannesburg, South Africa, Nairobi, Kenya, Accra, Ghana, New York City, Atlanta, Georgia, Jackson, Mississippi, or Memphis, Tennessee, the cry is always the same: we want to be free.
A long time ago, when I used to go to the theater, to the New Daisies and also the Old Daisies, things was real beautiful at that time. Wasn't so much violence. Beale Street used to be the go-go place, all up and down Beale Street, from 2nd clean on to 4th. Used to be the go-go street, Beale Street. I remember long years ago, back in 1940, when I first come to Memphis, all up and down Beale Street was nothing but black. Anything that you wanted, you could come to Beale Street. All out of Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee, you name it, they was there. Anything that you wanted, you come to Beale Street. Never have to go to Main Street for anything. And if you went to Main Street, you went there on your own. Wasn't anything on Main Street that wasn't on Beale Street.
A. Schwab's store was founded on Beale Street in 1876. We've been here 105 years now, and our motto is, if you can't find a Schwab's, you're better off without it.
I'd say in 40 and 50 that our makeup was 90% black, our customers. And in fact, it was that up until just a very few years ago, when you started getting tourists, and it's until urban renewal and all came along.
Beale Street became kind of a victim of the shopping center spree. About 1950, shopping centers opened up, and people started going out. And many of the white people, which was on Main Street, started going to shopping centers and not coming to the downtown area. At the same period of time, and Mr. Simmons, I believe is the correct name, was in charge of urban renewal. And he had visions of restoring Beale Street, historically restoring it. And as director of urban renewal, Memphis Urban Renewal, he could start the laws turning to bring the money down here for this purpose. As it got the laws passed, the man passed away, he died. The people who took over the project, nothing was wrong, but they did not have the same feeling that the man did that started the project. So they merely had to comply with the law, come through here, bulldoze it down, clear it off, and call it a good job, which is not what the intentions were. Through a deal where they got this declared an historical landmark, which is over 100 years old, so it automatically is, then you cannot touch these buildings. So then they had to change their idea and come back and preserve the buildings. This was about 1968 period of time. In their way of thinking, they started running everybody off the street. They did it, first they came in here and told them that they're going to block the street, which they are not going to do. Then they came here and told us that they were going to take this property by right of eminent domain. We told them they're not going to do it. Then they came here and offered us money. We would not take the money. They came through here with every form of intimidation you can imagine. They condemned the building. 3 days later, it was uncondemned. Anything that you can think of, they tried. But to my knowledge, no person was put off of this street by a court order. Everyone was run off of here through intimidation or threats by the government. Well, you're looking at the two stubbornest Jewish people in the city of Memphis. We stayed here because we believe that this area is a gold mine of history, of business, of music. You name it, it is here, and it will be here. The people are in Memphis. All the musicians are here.
Tell your mom, tell your pa, go to run you back to Arkansas. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, sit in misery.
Lillian Glover, known as Ma Rainey II, took urban renewal's destruction of Beale Street as an affront to the rich heritage and culture of a once thriving community.
Now today, they don't know what Beale Street was like. I know because I was down there night and day. I might go home and sleep about an hour, and I'd get up and come, especially at 2 o'clock, I'd be on Beale Street. I'd have to see what was happening. And I was always the chief of police on Beale Street. And so they didn't fight unless you taking their money or something like that. But like going out today, killing you up for your little money, they didn't do that. And I just don't know just what come over Beale Street because, and when I had to move away from down Beale Street, it like to kill me. I cried like I couldn't stay nowhere else but Beale Street. That's the truth. And I just don't know what come over Beale Street. They just had to tear it. I don't think they should have tore it all down. They should have saved the building, put something around them so that it look kind of like Beale Street or something. It don't look like, because it never will look like Beale Street no more. I don't care what they build up. I don't see why the colored people shouldn't have Beale Street. The white don't know nothing about no Beale Street. They come down there to the Ramos and things like that, but they don't know nothing about no Beale Street. What they know about Beale Street? Nothing. And just like I hear a lot of people say, I know the handy and I know this. They don't know. I was down there amongst them and be there all night. A lot of nights I'd be there all night. And if anybody know anything about Beale Street, I do. Night and day. And I had my fun on Beale Street. It really hurt me when they tore it down too, I'm telling you. That gal with the blue dress on. She can boogie woogie all night long. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Watch that boy at the diamond ring. He knows how to shake that thing.
Former Beale Streeters haven't quite accepted the change on Beale Street. Giving way to time and new developers, Beale Street will be commercialized, not retaining any of the ethnic flavor that made it Beale Street. Ironically, while the Handy statue stands rusty with spider webs, the recently built Elvis Presley Plaza is a tourist attraction, showing the new direction the street will take in the future.
When I entered Beale Street to see Elvis Presley standing there, his stature, I was shocked to see him because Beale Street have always been known for a black people's street. And I feel that he's out of place to be on Beale Street. And when we would always want to go to the theater where we could enter the front door, we would always come to Beale Street. This was a street known for black people only. So they had other streets in Memphis and theaters, you know. But when you go to those theaters and buy a ticket to enter, you always had to go to the side door or the back door. So I just feel that Elvis Presley should be on any street other than Beale Street. And that's the way I feel about Beale Street.
Memphis bluesmen continue to carry the tradition of Beale Street musicians elsewhere in the city, clinging to the hope that one day they will return to the birthplace of the blues.
That's one of mine. I wrote that.
Every Wednesday, we have an amateur program.
That's right, sure did, because I was on the amateur.
You would audition at the Club Handy. And then if you was good enough to be on the show, you play at the Palace Theater every Wednesday night.
Look like you should have seen me.
Good while.
At the Palace. Cause Rufus and Bones
was on the show. Rufus and Bones was on the show, and then had a lot of kids coming in, being on the show. I had some friends of mine, little children. They won first prize too.
every week I'd win a prize.
Cause I played at Mitchell's, and it was Mitchell's first, and then he changed it over to the Club Handy, and I played there for about 15 or 20 years, and left and went with B.B. King. And when I came back from the trip with B.B. tour, man, Beale Street looked like it was dead. You couldn't see anyone. You looked for somebody, you couldn't see nobody. And it was like that a long time. And so I just wanted to know what happened. What happened to Beale Street? I hope it will come back. For different children's sakes, little children coming up so they could see what what I saw. But I say again, I don't think it will ever be like Beale Street again.
When they tore up Beale Street and some more places in this city, they did an awful thing they ever did in their life. I don't think that they didn't have to do that. I know they did. So I just have just remember how it used to be, because people had a good time on Beale Street. They wasn't doing nobody bad. The baddest somebody on Beale Street was Suge Jones, that police. He was the baddest one.
Like a Mississippi bullfrog sitting on a hollow stump. Like a Mississippi bullfrog sitting on a hollow stump. I got so many men I don't know which way to jump. Oh, flip, flop and fly. Don't care if I die. Oh, flip, flop and fly. I don't care if I die. Don't ever leave me.
In it. And in order for me to get the feeling of Beale Street like it perhaps once was, I had to go maybe 12, 14 different places all around the city to come home at the end of the day and feel revitalized. There was something there. And I can always, just as my mother, I think of my mother when she was a little girl, she and her sister, They would talk about when they would walk down to Beale Street from St. Paul, and they would see the peacocks strolling across the expansive grounds of Church Auditorium, and the people in their fine carriages and their fine clothes, black people. And they would walk up the street, and you would see the neighbors, you would see your minister, you would see the school teacher. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody believed in each other. And despite the fact that the country was tearing them apart as black people, they believed in each other, and that street kept them revitalized and going. And we've got to get it back, even if it means sending it all across this city so that this city will survive.
As of now, they're in the process of rebuilding Beale Street, which we hope will be for the best, but that remains to be seen. But my opinion is Beale Street will never be the same.
If Beale Street could talk, married men would have to take their beds and walk, except one or two who never drink booze, and the blind man on the corner who sings this Beale Street blues. I'd rather be here than any place I know. I'd rather be right here than any place I know. It's going to take the sergeant for to make me go. Going to the river, maybe by and by. Mississippi River, and there's a reason why. 'Cause the river's wet and old Beale Street's gone dry.